Hello and welcome. Here's what's happening right now. Rising fear of a full-scale war as Israel and Iran trade strikes.
The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them.
Threats that the first wave of attacks could be just the beginning.
We don't have the slightest idea what happened here.
A crucial clue located after the tragic Air India crash.
It was this little teeny fire. And I don't believe what's happened since then.
Plus, the tips that ignited an investigation into a BC wildfire.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Iran launched a number of ballistic missiles at Israel today, stepping up its retaliation, hitting Tel Aviv just within the last few hours. It comes less than 24 hours after Israel struck a number of targets across northern Iran designed to abruptly halt the country's nuclear program. It is a volatile and fluid situation with a flurry of diplomatic activity underway at the United Nations to avoid further escalation. CTV's Judy Trin is following all the developments. Judy, where do things stand now?
Heather, the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations has just updated the council in terms of the mounting death toll in his country. What he said was that there are confirmed 78 deaths and 300 people injured following Israel's attacks last night. It began less than 24 hours ago. What we know is that on Israel's side, that Iran has launched about 100 missiles, most of which have been struck down by both Israeli forces with the help of U.S. military. We also know that there are 22 people injured in Tel Aviv after some buildings were struck. Now, this is happening at a time when global leaders are calling for restraint. In what is being called a decapitation strike, Israel unleashed more than 200 fighter jets on 100 targets across Iran. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the operation to destroy Tehran's nuclear capabilities and trigger regime change.
Our fight is not with you. Our fight is with the brutal dictatorship that has oppressed you for 46 years. I believe that the day of your liberation is near.
The bombings come as the United States was negotiating with Iran to curb its nuclear program. President Donald Trump said he knew about Israel's plans and warned Iran to make a deal. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, "The United States makes the most lethal weapons anywhere in the world, and Israel has a lot of it. There's still time to make the next already planned attacks come to an end. Just do it before it's too late." Dozens of Iranians were killed, among them 4 top military commanders and 2 key nuclear scientists. The assassinations involved months of planning. This footage shows Mossad agents smuggling drones into Iran before their launch. On the streets of Tehran, demonstrations erupted as people supported their president, who called for revenge. Israel will regret its foolish actions, said President Masoud Pezeshkian as he launched a counterattack. Canada's foreign minister didn't take questions on her way into the National Security Council meeting. But on social media, Anita Anand urged all parties to refrain from actions that further destabilize the region. Words echoed by other leaders.
It is obviously a rapidly evolving situation. This was a unilateral action by Israel. So I think it is now crucial for many allies, including the United States, to work as we speak to de-escalate. I know they're doing that.
Benjamin Netanyahu says these attacks will continue for days until there is certainty that Iran can no longer build a nuclear bomb. What we don't know is the amount of damage that's been done to Iran's nuclear facilities. Much of those institutions are either deep underground or hidden in mountains. Heather.
CTV's Judy Trin for us tonight in Ottawa. Thank you, Judy. For more on this developing story, let's bring in CTV's U.S. political analyst Eric Ham for The View from Washington. Eric, we know President Trump has warned Iran to agree to a deal on its nuclear program before, quote, there's nothing left. Do you think negotiations are even still possible at this point in time?
Well, considering Iran has already suspended talks over its nuclear program with the United States, and also now we know that the president wants a deal and has made clear and telegraphed a deal, the fact that we are not seeing it and then Iran has already responded with a drone attack, it appears as though those talks are at least over for now, and the president and his anticipation and hopes of making a deal are back to square one.
And Eric, we are learning late this evening that the U.S. is helping to intercept some of those missiles. So what do you make of that, and how does that add to the situation?
Well, unfortunately, it puts the United States in a position where it did not want to be. We know that in the immediate aftermath of the attack, both President Trump as well as Secretary of State Marco Rubio made clear that this was a unilateral action by Israel and that the United States was not involved. And now the fact that the United States is at least helping deter many of those attacks, and at least in the eyes of Iran, this certainly makes the United States complicit and also potentially draws the United States further into the conflict.
Eric, thank you so much for breaking this down for us, our U.S. political analyst, Eric Ham. As the tense situation in the Middle East evolves, people here in Canada with ties to the region are watching every development. CTV's Adrian Gobriel reached out to both communities with ties to Iran and Israel. Adrian joins us from Toronto this evening. Adrian, what are we hearing from the communities tonight?
Well, Heather, here in this Canadian-Iranian community in North Toronto, many people are feeling conflicted. For months, some have railed against the Israeli military's military action in Gaza, while also having firsthand knowledge of the horrors of Iran's authoritarian regime, now as Netanyahu sets his sights on Tehran.
Grocery store owner Kovos Hozanzadeh says each hour is a struggle as he keeps a watchful eye on the news back in Iran.
We need peace. We need peace with the neighbors. We need peace with the world.
Peace is now a commodity in short supply in the Middle East.
Worrisome even it leads to World War III. Who knows?
It's a stark difference of opinions in a nearby Jewish neighborhood.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, Iran is a rogue country.
I think Israel helps the world, because if Israel wouldn't do it, who will do it?
For someone like me to speak up and say the Islamic Republic does not represent Iranian people, and for that purpose I had to be isolated and be threatened with my...
Elahehi Jamali is an Iranian activist who's spoken out in support of Israel's right to defend itself. She says for that, she's had to go underground for months at a time, claiming her life is under threat by Iran's proxies around the world. She takes no issue with Israel bombing areas that appear to be residential.
When heads of states like the Islamic Republic, when high-profile people like that live in a building, all of those residents are part of that regime, which means all of those residents are partaking in the hostage holding of my nation.
Can you imagine if somebody notorious or nefarious was living down by the lake here in Toronto in one of those high-rises, and somebody thought it's okay to go after them and bomb the entire building?
Canadian-Iranian Samira Mohideen believes she's already seeing similarities between the way Israel has hit Gaza and now Tehran.
What are Iranian lives worth? And the threat that Israel is posing to the region is not talked about enough, I don't think.
Now, one thing we heard from all sides that we spoke with today is that an end to the current regime in Iran would be good for that region and the world over, while also acknowledging that some of those killed in the recent attacks were masterminds behind multiple killings the world over. Heather.
CTV's Adrian Gobriel in Toronto. Thanks. We're learning more today about the final moments of Air India Flight 171 that crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all but one of the 242 passengers on board. The plane's black box has been recovered from the crash site in the Indian city of Ahmedabad. CTV's John Panavale Rao on the investigation and what we're hearing from the lone survivor.
At the crash site, investigators have only just begun to piece together why the Air India jet struggled to climb so quickly after takeoff. Reviewing a pair of videos of the disaster, and reportedly both of the plane's black boxes have now been recovered. As relatives of so many victims try to come to terms with what happened.
All of us at Air India are devastated by this loss.
Of the 242 people on board the Boeing Dreamliner headed for London, only Vishwas Kumar survived, astonishingly walking away from the crash. Today, he said he doesn't know why he lived. After takeoff, within a minute, he says, it felt like the plane came to a standstill. I could feel the engine thrust increasing to go up, but it crashed. Kumar was in seat 11A in an emergency exit row. He says when the plane hit a hostel and exploded, he saw a way out. The side of the plane I was on landed on the ground floor. I could see there was a space outside the plane. So when my door broke, I tried to escape through a little space, and I did so. Incredibly, he only suffered minor injuries, while everyone else perished, including Nirali Patel of Toronto, whose husband and other relatives are now en route to India. There, prayer vigils are being held across the country, with it still not certain how many also died on the ground. As for why the plane only reached an altitude of 200 meters before descending, experts say the engines and flap position will be looked at. The pilot was a veteran with more than 8,000 hours of flying experience.
We don't have the slightest idea what happened here. Not at all. Obviously, it's a terrible tragedy.
A tragedy in which Kumar lost his brother and can't believe he alone survived. John Benavalli Rao, CTV News.
A student who was supposed to be on that Air India flight says she is grateful to be alive and shocked by the tragedy. Bomi Chauhan says bumper-to-bumper traffic saved her life. She had her boarding pass to return to the UK after a vacation and says she missed the flight by just 10 minutes. Here in this country, controversy continues surrounding the invitation of India's Narendra Modi to the G7 in Alberta next week. But a new report suggests the relationship may be warming even further, with talk of closer security ties between the two countries. CTV's Abigail Beeman joins us from Ottawa. Walk us through what we're hearing this evening, Abigail.
Heather, Canada says there's no formal agreement. The two governments are having conversations around security concerns, while all this comes at a fraught time for Canada-India relations. With controversy around Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's invitation to next week's G7 summit, Bloomberg reports India and Canada have a new deal to share intelligence around terrorism and crime.
What does that entail?
The public safety minister seemed to throw cold water on that.
I understand there have been discussions from law enforcement to law enforcement. There is no formal agreement.
We are exploring pathways to reset the ties, and we'll see as to how we take things forward.
While Prime Minister Mark Carney's office pointed to the call the two leaders had last week, where, importantly, there was agreement to continued law enforcement dialogue and discussions addressing security concerns.
We are rebuilding these relationships. The conversations have been positive, and we're looking at planning other meetings with them as well.
I find it a little heartbreaking.
This former CSIS intelligence officer says there hasn't been a problem with exchanging information. The issue is with reliability.
So coming up with a new exciting schedule or protocol for exchanging isn't going to change the issues of reliability. It isn't going to change the issues of what do they do with that information, or the fact that the Canadian authorities, principally the RCMP, can't really work with what the Indian government gives them because it doesn't meet any threshold of evidence.
With both Canada and India talking about rebuilding or resetting the relationship, Modi and Carney are set to meet at the G7 in Kananaskis, Alberta in just a few days. Heather?
All right, Abigail, thanks. As that G7 summit approaches, demonstrations by several organizations are planned to send their message to state leaders, with the first of many happening today in Calgary. And that's where we find CTV's Kathy Lee. What was the focus of today's protest, Kathy, and how were police preparing to handle these events?
Heather, for the most part, police and RCMP believe that protests in Calgary and also Banff will be peaceful. This group here, Bono's organization supporting Africa, is the first to gather for the G7 summit. This is more of an awareness campaign versus a rally or a demonstration. They are taking advantage of this opportunity to have discussions about investing more in Africa.
Canada was behind some very impactful initiatives on maternal and child health, on education that had a very strong positive impact on Africa. And this year it's not really on top of the agenda.
There are 3 designated demonstration zones in Calgary for the G7 summit and another one in Banff. Hundreds of people are expected to be out rallying through the weekend until the end of the summit.
Should people endanger others or engage in lawful behavior, we're prepared to deal with that as well.
The director of the Toronto-based G7 research group expects the protests to be peaceful. However, following the clashes in the United States over President Donald Trump's immigration raids and tensions in the Middle East, there is the potential for things to get heated at demonstrations here.
They will be angrier than they otherwise would have been. There will probably be, some of them are more aggressive in their tactics.
No matter how many protesters come out, the G7 leaders most likely won't see them as they're meeting in Kananaskis Village, which is about an hour's drive from here and completely closed off to the public. Heather.
CTV's Kathy Lee in Calgary. Canada's chief public health officer and the leader of the country's COVID-19 response is leaving her position. Theresa Tam has been in the role since June 2017 and will be leaving at the end of next week. The pediatric infectious disease physician says she's taking a break to think about new opportunities and spend time with family. Coming up, a destructive BC wildfire.
We are seeing and hearing a lot of information coming from social media.
Signs it may have been sparked by humans. Firefighters are getting a break in British Columbia, protecting homes in Squamish, north of Vancouver, from wildfire flames. Now, investigators are trying to zero in on what caused the fire that's threatened hundreds of houses all week. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson has the latest. Andrew, why is the fire being looked at as human-caused?
Heather, the majority of fires burning right now in BC were caused by lightning. But there were no strikes in the area Monday when flames first appeared in Squamish near a popular trail. 5 helicopters are working on the fire that is less than 100 meters from some homes. But structural protection teams have kept it from getting any closer, and it has instead grown in the opposite direction. Firefighters are taking advantage of cooler weather and higher humidity, while the RCMP is taking a closer look at how this all started, a major source of speculation online.
We are seeing and hearing a lot of information coming from social media where people are providing information. What we would ask is if anybody has that kind of information, doorbell cameras, any kind of footage, any information at all, please contact the Squamish RCMP detachment.
Investigators believe the fire started near a mountain biking trail. We spoke to one man who was among the first to spot flames.
I got down near the end of the road and I'm like, damn, that's a fire. I should phone. So around 4 o'clock, I called 911, and it was this little teeny fire. And I don't believe what's happened since then.
If investigators do confirm this fire was human-caused, they'll also be looking into whether someone was careless or criminal. The person responsible could face a fine or even be forced to pay for firefighting costs. That can be thousands of dollars per hour. Heather?
CTV's Andrew Johnson in BC for us. Friday the 13th may be unlucky for some, but it's the favorite time of year for thousands of bikers rolling into a small Ontario town. People on motorcycles from across North America are in Port Dover today for one of the largest bike gatherings in the country. It began in 1981 as a casual ride among friends and is showing no signs of slowing down 44 years later. Stay with us, CTV National News. We'll be right back. The stepfather of 2 missing siblings in Nova Scotia's Pictou County says he volunteered to take a polygraph test to help the police investigation.
I know it would be a big help in the case and kind of narrow down maybe some of the speculations and just provide more evidence.
Daniel Martell says he was asked if he was involved in the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, who were last seen with family on May 1st. Police have interviewed 54 people, but are tight-lipped about who took the tests or what the results were. They are also going through hundreds of hours of videos and nearly 500 tips. Some amazing technology has given a former Humboldt Bronco hockey player a new perspective.
It's fun, and you get to stand up again. Forget how tall you are.
Ryan Strasnitsky demonstrated the Exo Motion, a robotic exoskeleton that runs along a 12-meter track, allowing him not only to stand but also walk at this facility in Calgary.
It's incredible to do anything like hands-free, getting to hold a hockey stick, throw a football, brought back a lot of memories and made me really hopeful for the future to see where this exoskeleton can go.
Ryan was on the Humboldt Broncos bus 7 years ago when a crash killed 16 people and left him paralyzed. Researchers hope the exoskeleton will assist people with spinal cord injuries and other conditions, including Parkinson's disease. After the break, calling all collectors. Why this auction is putting the spotlight on a hockey legend. Hockey fans and collectors, take note. Some timeless pieces from the personal collection of Bob Cole are up for auction. His family organized it as a tribute to the legendary sportscaster who passed away last year. CTV's Garrett Berry sifted through some of the treasures today. Garrett, what did you find?
Heather, this auction is titled From the Passionate Life of Bob Cole, and you can see that passion in many of the items on display here. A signed pair of Wayne Gretzky gloves and a stack of Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em tapes. This collection, a look into Bob Cole's illustrious career, like all of these press passes and media books that propelled Cole to the heights of his power, the voice of Saturday night for so many Canadians.
The audacity, almost, of a young man from Quadavata Road in St. John's who grew up in the 30s and 40s, who then walked into Foster Hewitt's office when there was only one guy on the planet pretty much who broadcast hockey. He walked into his office and said, "I got a demo tape."
Each of Cole's 4 children have already laid claim to many of their favorite items, so this auction, for the rest, is part of saying goodbye and sharing Bob's memories with the world.
There was probably 4 people from coast to coast who were not watching the 2002 Olympic gold medal game. So even if you weren't a hockey fan, people knew his voice, and his voice was really special. It was really special.
It will surely draw the interest of hockey fans and collectors from coast to coast, all of whom can bid online. Bartlett's Auction House is already seeing a spike in web traffic.
This resonates with a much larger crowd than just the local Newfoundlander. There's obviously appeal here as well, but we'll have 150,000 people on our site during auction week.
The auction is set to start wrapping up next Tuesday. Heather.
Some fantastic hockey history there, Garrett. Thank you. That is our newscast for this Friday. Thank you for watching. I'm Heather Butts. Your local CTV News starts right now.